Kia ora, welcome to the last Politics from Canterbury before the election. We're coming at you straight out of Ireland. We've got Winston there, he might be quite important in the election. We've got history student, student of history and teacher, Liam. And we've got Tony, long-time Labour member. We're politically neutral, but we're just trying to drag everyone in. We've had a cornucopia of different political views. Today we're going to keep it simple. We're reviewing River of Freedom, which I think will have an impact on election 2023. No one else has done it. So here we go. People have reviewed it, by the way, but I'm talking about our podcast explaining how it will have a impact. Liam and Tony.
Guess first.
Guess first.
Oh,
Tony.
okay. Yeah, well, I mean, it was very well timed I think it's an election production. A very expensive and well done production, but I think it's got a political motive.
Are you a bit surprised, Tony, that we haven't seen too many reviews? We haven't seen too many Herald reviews, listener reviews. In fact, if you Google reviews of it, there's one review I could find, which is Graham Tuckett of Stuff, and he urged people to see it. He wasn't a fan of it, but he did think it was worth seeing. Are you, Liam, you're a bit surprised that the media's sort of not really keen on reviewing it? It's a bit hard to find.
No, the only other person I've seen review it was Sean Plunkett from The Platform, and he actually said he expects that in a few decades it's going to be kind of mandatory watching in school, and he reviewed it quite favourably and said actually it's a good counterpoint to
this is a Radio New Zealand documentary,
which
actually was quite a good documentary. In it, who are I guess if we're looking at River Freedom, it's about the parliamentary protest, the occupation of the Parliament lawn. There's a little bit about leading up to it with trucks going everywhere. Support. The one thing I noticed was all the supporters in the small towns, when they've got footage of people getting out on the road and saying, yeah, go for it. And we certainly didn't see that on the news.
No.
And who are the politicians that feature prominently in it?
There are only two politicians that I think were shown in a favourable light: Marama Fox and Winnie Peete.
This is the Right Honourable Winston Peters. Yeah. Well, Marama Fox used to be the co-leader of the Maori Party, but is no longer. And Winston Peters may be coming back after the election. And if he does come back, I think it will be partly to do with the freedom movement. And partly to do with the fact that we've got movies like River of Freedom floating around New Zealand and being seen by thousands of people, and you're not really reading about it much.
Well, you have to give him something, isn't you? But I mean, I think it's been timed quite well to get it. I mean, it has. You may be right. This might be some of the reason that New Zealand First has got a bit of traction, because they haven't really got anything else.
They've got some big social media there, Tony. We don't all get our news from TV1 and TV3 these days, mate.
I don't watch much social media even, nor TV1 or TV2, but just from what I can see of Peters, he's just regurgitating what he's had for the last 40 odd years. But I was particularly concerned about the use of trucks in the documentary. That goes back to the destabilising of Helen Clark. They would start running trucks out and that. The trucks are a very part of the right wing group, and that would put that whole documentary
in that camp, right wing. Well, the one thing in the documentary, they said they did a poll of the protesters, and it was maybe 43%, not quite half, but they were Labour Green supporters.
Right.
A lot of these protesters, they're probably not Labour Green supporters now. And I think this particular protest, there was an article by Bryce Edwards that did very well. We ran it on Scoop and saw around the Herald and stuff. Basically, he put the particular policies around mandates as a massive reason that Labour lost support. And as Tony said, this movie going around New Zealand behind the scenes in the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's been seen by thousands of people, packed out the embassy in Wellington. I think it's going to actually have quite a big impact. And the reason I say that is, I know there's a lot of groups like the CTU have got their own ads pushing for Labour, I guess, and the Greens. And then you've got the Taxpayers Union with their waste the debt clock.
Yeah.
But I think this movie is much, much more effective. If you sit there for 2.5 hours, even if you're sort of neutral, you come out thinking, hey, maybe Michael Woods was a bit of a jerk, you know?
I think the whole thing was that it showed that the government wasn't willing to negotiate with the protesters at all, and Winston Peters was the only person that went out. It felt very much like the whole Bush, if you're not with us, you're against us, we don't negotiate with terrorists. And this idea that even, when you're...
Even talking to them. The one thing I was just trying to remember, I know that there was brief mention of Chris Luxon. I don't remember there was any scenes of Chris Luxon. At the start, it had a couple of national MPs sort of arguing, I think, against some of the more extreme aspects of the COVID legislation.
Yeah.
So National didn't really appear in it hardly at all. David Seymour, even though he didn't, a couple of times, not necessarily massively favourably, but definitely the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern at the time, unfavourable. Michael Woods, unfavourable. Trevor Mallard, definitely unfavourable.
And of course, the New Zealand first person who was given a good favourable light, wasn't she?
There's a New Zealand. What you're talking about is Kirsten Murphy, who's a New Zealand first candidate, number 11 on the list. She did appear repeatedly throughout the movie, and certainly in a very favourable light. And again, that's sort of a behind the scenes thing that's not happening and not really being picked up and discussed this election. It's all about the debates, which I think are, well, me and Tony, we're going to wrap this up quickly. We're succinct. The debates don't really do much. All the people, this is my opinion, we're at one, it's just packed out with Green supporters in Christchurch. I don't think they change anyone's opinion. Do you think that debate changed anyone's opinion?
Well, I think the Maori Party is going to get. I think that'll be a surprise myself.
Okay.
I think people who are disillusioned with the wealth tax will go to the Maori tax. I think.
Maori Party.
Will go to the Maori Party.
Well, yeah, but I think, well, it's because we're giving our views. My final view is that I think River of Freedom will be one of the most effective pieces of political propaganda that's been put out there, and people will study it afterwards. Final words.
I thought it was a really good counterpoint to the RNZ one, and I think the tagline for the RNZ one was the violent, looking at the violent
boiling point.
Yeah, but I think the tag, the subtitle for it was looking at the violent protests or whatever. So the idea of Rivers of Freedom really tried to push the peaceful element of it, and that dancing aspect. They tried to portray it more of as you've said before, a Takaka festival. And one thing I really didn't like about it is that they didn't acknowledge any of the negativity in the movement. They just said it was entirely the government that was, was violent towards us, and I think it would have been, I would have liked it more if they were slightly more balanced and admitted that there were some kind of unsavory elements in their movement, but they didn't. But hey, yeah, good counterpoint.
Tony, you get to have the final word before the election.
Well, I think it was a very effective, anti-government piece of soft propaganda, really. It will definitely work against the government, people who watched it and accepted it. So all credit to it, and I'd love to know who funded it all.
Labour love, I reckon. Anyway, we'll see you after the election. Get out there and vote. We're not going to make any predictions.
Christmas.
Just do it all.